These are the questions for the two city council candidates for Hammond City Council.
Okay, so if you're going to look at them when you ask the question, I'm going to put the microphone over here. We can pick you up and you can look back.
Okay, first question. Yes. How long have you lived in the city of Hammond, and when did you become a registered voter in the county of Riverside?
I moved here back in 1987, and I've been, basically, you know the old saying, once you move to Hammond, once you're here, you never get out, you never leave. I left and I came back, and then I left and I came back. And I've been here now over 5 years. I raised both of my two older children here. They graduated. My son, who's 31, he graduated from Baptist Christian School. And my daughter was also raised here as well. They went to a Catholic school. And as far as my registration, I just recently re-registered at my new address here because I moved here, like I said, 5 years ago. So I just recently re-registered.
Let's do a Russ. What steps and how are you going to change the non-transparency of the Hammond City Council and get them working together to improve our city?
Well, I'm vertically challenged, so I'm going to stand up. I think one of the attributes that I learned, and it was solidified through my law enforcement career, is to be a good listener and understand the value of consensus building. I recognize that as a city council representative, my job is not to represent what Russ Brown thinks he wants to have happen. My job is to represent what the largest number of our constituents throughout the city think is the best way to achieve a particular goal or a task. So I would strive to encourage those same qualities in my colleagues on the council. I think open conversation at council meetings is healthy, and I think something other than a 5-0 unanimous vote all the time is also healthy, because everyone on the council should be entitled to have their say-so and their input.
Stacie, what have you done to prepare yourself for this position?
How do I make this stop? Hold on a second. How do I make this that little light at the top? See that little light? No, this. Can you read that again? All right, that's the start of it. Timer challenge, okay.
What have you done to prepare yourself for this position?
You know what is it on? No, it's
Yes.
not on.
Push the
Yes,
button.
it's on. You're on.
The green light's on, you're on.
It's a red light. I just talk loud.
She does.
One push.
Okay. I've been preparing for this position, I think, for a very long time, not knowing it. I was asked as the same when you got asked to be appointed many times to run because of the community involvement that I have here. I'm very action-oriented. I've been working in the Valley the last 5 years that I've been here, working with the police force to try and work with the homeless issue we have a huge problem, and it needs to be addressed directly. So I have been working with the ROBS team. I've been working with City Council. I was on the homeless task force for 2.5 years at the city, and I also have, several things that I'm on, the homeless outreach team and things like that. So I feel that my city involvement, not only on the higher level, but within the community, my whole entire 5 years has been dedicated to community service.
Since your year on the council, name 3 major contributions that you made that have impacted positively on the community.
Well, I think the first one that comes to mind was a difficult decision, and that was when we were facing the budget this year. We had two options, and as everyone knows, the city has struggled to balance its budget, and we've had to draw from reserves many years in the past. This year we had two options other than drawing from reserves. One was to take some money that was perceived to be as excess funds from Measure U, and I felt that the other option, even though I didn't like keeping positions vacant and kicking the deferred maintenance down the road again, I just felt that we owed it to our community to protect the Measure U funds this year because that was their understanding and their intent. I think the other thing is being in a position to support our public safety departments when they come with agenda items to make purchases of equipment, and I wholeheartedly supported that. That's only two.
On your Facebook page, Project Hope, you stated in November 2016, panhandling is not a crime, and you advocated that panhandlers be allowed to get permits to panhandle. How do you reconcile that to your position about panhandlers that are in the Valley Chronicle this summer? About panhandlers that, I don't know what that word is.
Just let her answer the question.
Do you understand the question, sort of? About how do you reconcile that to your position about panhandlers that live in the Valley,
That are.
that are in the Valley Chronicle this summer?
Very difficult question. Maybe you want to go,
Skip it.
how you reconcile your position.
So you advocated that panhandling is not a crime.
This
And then
last month, the Valley Chronicle had an article with Stacie stating don't give money to the panhandlers.
Now,
That was written in Chronicle.
Well, first of all, we have to be very careful what we believe from 2016 in the Chronicle. If any of you have read it, you very well know that there's been a lot of misinformation in there. As far as my position on panhandling, it's not a crime. Look it up. It's not a crime. Is it a problem? Absolutely. Does it need to be rectified? Absolutely. If people want help and they're holding a sign, they can call me, they can call any one of our members on the hot team, and we will get them help and get them off the streets. I do it every single day. If they do not want help and they just want to take money from this good citizens in this community, then we have to make it very difficult for them to not do it. We have to stop giving handouts. If they want help, we'll provide it. If not, we have to stop helping them and enabling them to continue in it. But no, it is not legally, by law, a crime.
okay, Russ, you have been on the council for a year. What would you consider is your biggest contribution, personal, to the council and the city?
Isn't that pretty much like the last
Kind of like
question?
the last one.
Yeah.
Do the third
Oh,
one.
yes, two. Oh, gee, I had to think of the third one now. I think probably it's the perspective that I try to bring from being as objective and open-minded to an issue. We all have diverse backgrounds, and I think that my background of being involved in a municipal government position kind of puts me in a different paradigm, I guess, if you will, that allows me to look at the situation not only from the council perspective or how the citizenry might view it, but also how our city staff might view it. Any decision that we make obviously is going to impact their operations and how they do their business. So I think rather than singling one particular thing, thinking about all the agendas that have come and gone, I think it's just the way I approach evaluating each agenda item and what we discuss.
You have a passion to help the homeless. Where did your experience come from?
Really, I started about 5 years ago when I saw a very, very sad situation here in Hemet. And I decided that I needed to do something. It wasn't enough to see something and act like you didn't see it and walk away. Part of what makes a difference in a community is when people start acting. If we all just sit around and do nothing, then it's going to continue, and it's going to continue to grow. So I decided there was at least something I could do. So 5 years ago I started working with other organizations, CASA, NAMI, Liberty Ranch, local leaders, Vista Solutions for Change, doing my homework, talking with leaders who actually can make it work, who have good functioning programs, asking them, what can I do? How can I fix this? And then that's when it just kind of happened, to be honest.
For Russ, what is the city doing to replace the restaurants that have vacated their buildings? Millie's, Mimi's, Coco's, the old IHOP on Florida.
Is that for Russ? Or is that a city?
That's for Russ Brown, yes.
I get that, but you're asking us for
Any questions for him? Ask him.
Okay.
One more
Do
time.
you know what the city is doing to replace the restaurants that have vacated their buildings?
Well, our community development department is outwardly reaching to potential developers and business owners and trying to encourage them to come to the city of Hemet. As I mentioned before, that's a difficult uphill battle because there's a perception that it's not a safe city for a variety of reasons. And whether it's real or imagined, it's tough to get businesses to take a chance on the city. One of the things that there is a pending new business coming in that's going to go where the former Coco's is. That's going to be another eating establishment, popular hamburger business, and I think it's Habit, not Hobbit, Habit. And but it is a struggle. We've lost a lot of quality businesses, and I was very disappointed to see Mimi's close so fast. So. There is a lot of activity going on through the community development trying to bring additional restaurants in to replace those.
Stacie, how do you feel about sanctuary cities?
You get all the highlighted questions. Wonderful. Russ is so wonderful. Tell me how great you are, Russ. I get all the difficult ones. But it's okay. It's okay. No problem. You know what? That's a really tough issue. And I would not want to say anything without getting fully involved in the information on that. I don't believe that it's something that we want to do for sure. That's, my opinion. But I wouldn't want to put anything on record at this time without doing my due diligence to investigate that further.
Good answer.
Okay, Russ. Homeless crisis, exclamation mark. What is your solution?
Well, I think first of all we have to recognize that the homeless problem is not a Hemet problem. It's a nationwide problem, and it's everywhere. And it's more extreme in some places than others. And it's not something that government can solve by itself. So I wholeheartedly support and endorse public and private partnerships and tackling, much like what is underway now. And we do have the benefit of passing a resolution at council meeting last night to accept funds that are federal funds that are going to be available for a short period of 2 years. But there'll be $10 million allocated for Riverside County, and some of that money will flow to us to help us establish emergency shelters for the homeless. And I think recognizing that there are people who need to step up and a hand up, those facilities will help.
Stacie, you have lots more. These two seem to go together, so I'm going to kind of read them together. What was your involvement in the riverbed encampment by the Saboba Bridge? And this next one says, how did the homeless get water while in the riverbed? It was private property. What was your role?
Well, I know who asked this question, so I will make sure that I address it. As far as the riverbed, we had a client in there that we were removing from the riverbed and sending him home. That is my involvement. We sent him home, we got him out of the riverbed, and he's no longer homeless. He has a home, he has a job, and he's doing very well.
The last one, Russ, and it's kind of like some of the others, we've already asked them. Do you have a plan to rid Hemet of homeless and crimes that are associated with the homeless?
Single-handedly, I don't have a plan. Other than continuing to support the programs that are available right now. Our ROCKS team is probably the most effective tool that we have, and where we involve police officers, public works employees, code enforcement, and a mental health professional. As I mentioned before, there's a lot of people that are homeless, and there, but for the grace of God, go any of us. Those people view their situation as temporary, and anything that we can do to make it a temporary situation and help them bootstrap themselves up and become contributing members. The ones that opt not to do anything to help themselves and not abide by the rules of facilities that are willing to give them shelter and a roof over their head and food, those folks may need to be dealt with through the enforcement aspect that the law enforcement has. There's a lot of tools that law enforcement used to have that are no longer available. So it's a challenging job, but I think that focusing on those who need the help, want the help, that's the first place to start.
I didn't see page 3. With the Saboba, the riverbed, there was also, and I'm sorry, this goes with that also, it says you started a GoFundMe page for them, and I'm assuming that's the people that were in the riverbed, and the question is why?
I never started a GoFundMe page for anybody in the riverbed.
That's the answer to that. I have no more for you in particular, Russ, so I'm going to read for both of you and then back to Stacie, and kind of alternate that way till we get them all taken care of. So this is for both candidates. Since we have an active code enforcement department in Hemet, why are there so many derelict properties? Who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll take that softball question. Actually, I think it was touched on earlier by one of the, I think by Linda Krupa when she was talking about how much money it costs to deal with the illegal cannabis distribution businesses. It's much like playing whack-a-mole. You deal with one of them and you tie your people up in court and you expend the money and the problem just moves to another location. So code enforcement is understaffed and there's plenty of work to go around. So one of the things that we were able to do with community development block grant funds, and we just voted to approve that at Tuesday night's meeting, is going to allocate some additional funding to code enforcement. So perhaps we'll be able to bring some additional code enforcement officers on board, and they can help pick up some of the backlog of work. Perfect.
Do you want to answer that one?
Do you like me to?
Well, it's for both.
Okay.
It was for both.
Sure.
Want me to read it again? You got it.
Yeah, I got it. If you take a drive around town and you look at the signs of the people who are leasing out those properties, take note, just take note. You'll see the same name over and over and over and over and over again. that one entity should be held to the fire, because that one entity, all of those properties are horrible. I don't work for the city right now, so I can't tell you what the city's doing or not doing behind the scenes. I don't know, but it looks like they're not doing a whole lot. And I don't know what the reason for that, but I want to find out why. And I want to find out why his feet are not being held to the fire. Because he has the majority of a lot of businesses in this town. Next time you drive around, look at the signs. That's what I would tell you. Look at the signs. It's not like we have to deal with a whole bunch of different owners. Look at the sign.
This is for Stacie. This is a big, long one.
Is it a question or a story?
Well, it's kind of a story,
Oh, wow.
apparently. We have, what experience and knowledge would you bring to consider three major issues facing the Hemet City Council in the future? Number one, long-term planning on how we can balance our budget without cutting vital services or taking Measure U funds. Two, what kind of, do you want to answer one at a time? or-
Can I look at the card and that
Sure.
way I can make sure that I answer them one at a time? Because by the time you get to the second question, I'll be honest, I'm gonna forget what the first one was. I don't know if anybody can relate to that, but there's no way I'm gonna remember all of them without having something to look at. So I need to look at these. Wow, and oh goodness.
Because I was a third grade teacher, so I can read pretty much any writing.
Yeah,
Some of it's
yeah.
others, but.
How we can balance our budget without cutting vital services or taking money from Measure U. Well, I definitely want to say that we agreed to not touch Measure U for anything other than safety. And that needs to stand. That needs to be protected at all costs, period, end of story. Whether we have a group of people, an oversight committee looking at it or not, we as council members need to be held accountable for that money, period, end of story on that one. What kind of expansion, and I didn't bring my glasses either. What kind of expansion, I told you I was getting older. What kind of expansion of transportation, I don't know what that word is. I don't know. I can't read the writing. Well, I'll read the third one. I know the third one is about the median. So can you tell me what the second one is after I read the third one?
What kind of expansion of transportation access by rail or ground would you support?
Well, Hemet, we're located in this really.
Can you read the question
Oh.
to everybody?
Oh, sure.
So they can hear it? I'm
really have to
3 minutes,
multitask.
I mean, a minute on it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what kind of expansion of transportation access by rail or ground would you support?
Hemet is kind of located in this really interesting position, because no matter which way you go, it's 20 minutes to any freeway. We're just in this little valley. So transportation is an issue. I've even had people ask me about transportation up to Idlewild. Although we do have one, it doesn't go up often. It's very expensive. So transportation here is an issue. I mean, other than what we have now for buses and things, underground and railways and all of that is going to be tough to have anybody want to entertain us. The same with businesses. A lot of people don't want to entertain us because I know that Russ said that it is perceived as a not safe community, but I would be willing to bet if I asked for a show of hands in here, how many of you go out after 6 p.m. down into downtown Hemet? How many of you go? Okay. A couple, a few. So,
Last part. Where do you stand on the Florida Avenue median? If you are for this construction, how would you protect the well-being of our small businesses that will be affected by this construction?
I'm not for it. I don't want it. It impedes our safety, fire, police from being able to appropriately and quickly do their jobs. There are a multitude of reasons why it is not a good idea. a lot of businesses are going to be hurt by this because people aren't gonna wanna go all the way down the street, turn around, go back this way and that way to get to businesses. It's not a good idea. It's being forced on us without our permission. We're trying to fight back and say no. So it's a real battle, and I would stand firm on that to do whatever I needed to do on council to make sure that didn't happen.
Last round question. What's your opinion on sanctuary cities?
Three words, Kate Steinley law. I look at things from what's the value added? And as far as I'm concerned, becoming a sanctuary city adds no value to your community. So that's the short and curt answer about that. If I have a little time, I'll give you my opinion on the Caltrans median project too. I also oppose it and was happy to be part of the delegation of representatives that went to Sacramento and met in the governor's office with Caltrans director. We were given some verbal promises up there that they're not upholding. I am absolutely convinced that the safety concerns that Caltrans has can be adequately addressed through enforcement. If you do strategic traffic enforcement, and I know how to do that, then that is the way to tackle their concerns about the safety project. And they're not even considering our concerns about the environmental impact. You're not going to change the number of turning movements. All you're going to do is move them someplace else and force traffic onto the other parallel streets. So for those reasons, plus what Stacie said about impeding our public safety response times, it's a big no for me, and I'm still doing what I can to stop it.
Do I get to ask do I get to answer one of Russ's questions, being he answered mine?
I don't care.
Which one did you want to answer?
I don't know. It was just a statement. It was just a statement.
Rhetorical question.
I'm going to read this one instead of the one I had because I can't quite figure out what this other one says. But Stacie, what would be the first thing or priority, if elected, that you would attack once elected to the council, and why?
The very first thing that I would attack, which we're already doing, is our streets. It is not a perceived thought. It is not a rumor that our streets are in bad shape and that they're not safe. Look at the crime stats. Go out, just drive up and down Florida. I've lived here a long time, and you can see hookers, you can see our parks are overtaken. Nobody goes to the parks. I would tackle that. We have, the homeless outreach team has a 5-year action plan. We were endorsed by the city of Hemet, so it's not some little group. We have over 200 volunteers in our community, and I would push very hard. We've been working with over 200 businesses here in the town actively to help them to stop panhandling in front of their businesses so that they can make a living and do well with their businesses.
This is for both. I understand that funds have been allocated for the renewal of the area on Howard Street. What is the status of that project? Oh, sorry, Harvard Street.
I'm just guessing, but we don't have a.
Oh, okay.
I was really confused.
Okay. Funds have been allocated for the renewal of the area on Harvard Street. What is the status of that project?
Right off the top of my head, I couldn't give you a definitive answer other than to say that I think if you visited it recently, as opposed to maybe in the previous few years, you've seen some visual improvements. And it's starting to look like more like the historic downtown park. And coming from, I haven't lived in Hemet as long as Stacie and a lot of you have. I've only been here less than 13 years. I spent 45 years in Claremont, and Claremont did a really good job of maintaining growth and positive environmental or economic improvements, but still kept the downtown feel of their downtown village. And I think that that is still something that is achievable here in Hemet, and Harvard Street's a good start. The specific plan that the council approved a long time ago is moving in the right direction, and there's a really bright future if we can ever get the means and funds to start seeing that kind of improvement developed.
I understand that funds have been allocated for the renewal of the area on Harvard Street. What is the status of that project?
Well, I'm not on council, so I can't tell you the status of any project right now. Russ has the advantage because he's on council, so he's privy to a lot of things. But I can tell you that I love Harvard Street. I just went there for lunch today over at Steve Covington's deli, and the Harvard salad is amazing. And I love it. You know, I love the changes that they've made there. It makes it warm and welcoming. And when I have friends over, you know, when we go for coffee, we don't go to Starbucks, we go to Harvard. Because it's warm and welcoming. And I would love to see South Harvard expand and be able to be made much more beautiful. I would love to see all of Florida Avenue restored back to its original, like the theater is being done. I was thrilled when I heard that they were redoing the theater and adding and painting and kind of taking back that old historic look. And I would love to see stuff like that going on. We lack a sense of community here. A lot of people don't get involved with one another often enough, and we need to have those types of places that we can go.
Let's do both again, because I've got more of those. On council seat, how will you improve the transparency of both the city and city council? That was another question about transparency. Did we answer that? Okay.
Well, actually, I think that was for Russ. I was never asked about my transparency.
Okay, you want to answer that one?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm extremely transparent. I mean, ask me anything. I will tell you that, you know, there's been some questions as to Project Hope, and I'll sit here and be transparent with you right now if you have any questions. Over the last 5 years that I've had this organization, I've done a lot of changes. I went in with one mentality, and after learning through the streets of what actually works, I had to do a 180 turn. I had to completely turn around my whole concept of what works. And you can help people with